Hello, it's Father Rich coming to you from the rectory again at Our Lady of Peace. I'm here in front of the Taj Mahal, not one of our masterpieces that every Christian should know, but the closest thing I could think of when it comes to the title of this next masterpiece, called The Temple. The Temple, a series of poems written by George Herbert, right at the same time as the Donne masterpiece, the Holy Sonnets that we just had. Same year, they were contemporaries. In fact, they say that Herbert's mother was the one to whom Donne wrote the sonnets for. And so there was a connection there. And he too would become an Anglican priest eventually. But the interesting thing about this series of 167 poems, I believe, was that none of them were published while he was living. He actually, towards the end of his life, he died very early, 39 years old, of tuberculosis. But he gave this collection of poems that really was his journal, essentially, to a person called Farrar, and said, suggested that he has them published. He said this: "If you think it may turn to the advantage of any dejected poor soul, let it be made public. If not, let him burn it. For I and it are the least of God's mercies." So it would be published in 1633, and it would become kind of known to be some of the best religious poetry ever written in English. He's very similar to Donne in what we talked about, this sense of his unworthiness. He actually was very successful in life, and he, by the age of 30, had become a part of Parliament. Excuse me, that might not be the right age. Let's verify that. He was born in 1593. He served in Parliament in 1623. So yes, he was 30 years old. He had graduated from Cambridge, so very successful, second in his class. But in all of this, he felt compelled in this this battle in his soul to become a deacon in the Church of England. Did so in 1626, was ordained in 1630, and again, unfortunately, died in 1633 of tuberculosis. None of his sermons survived, but he was known in his time as a priest to be very holy. But no, probably they didn't know he was even a poet. They didn't know that he wrote all this extensive poetry. His poetry was unique in that some of it actually, he would make images through the words. And he would actually, like if he was, his poem on the altar actually depicts an altar and Easter's wings. The lines are arranged like wings, so that was part of it. He had unique rhythm, and every poem had a different sense of rhythm. He didn't have one rhyme scheme that he would maintain or kind of meter. So that was a unique part of his approach as well. So some of the other aspects about him, he would kind of see, he described his own poetic calling as being a secretary of thy praise, of course, of God's. But some of the things that jumped out about, Herbert, again, very similar to Donne in the sense of very realistic, he didn't kind of say things in this idealistic way. We see some artists the same way, that Caravaggio was very committed to representing things as they were as opposed to the way they should be. They talk about the same thing with Herbert. This is what a great deal of religious poetry written through the centuries suffers from: being overly sentimental, often feels insincere, as though it was expressing what the poet wished to be feeling or thought he or she should be feeling, rather than what he or she was actually feeling. The strength of Herbert as a religious poet is that he was not afraid to tell the truth about his struggles and doubts and about the difficulties of the spiritual path, but he always ended with affirmation and hope. It was hope hard won, but more transformative because of the struggle. So that's certainly a huge aspect of Herbert and kind of what he contributes to the development of poetry. And again, with Donne, probably some of the most respected English poetry that's ever been written. So we're grateful for his willingness to publish kind of these inner workings of that's intimate conversation in his soul that he would record in these poems. I kind of think of the John Last Supper discourses of John's gospel and the high priestly prayer of Jesus that's there. We get this intimate window into the prayer discussion between Jesus, the Son, and the Father in those verses of John's Last Supper discourse, and particularly that high priestly prayer of John's gospel there. And I think this is very similar to what we get to see in Donne's poetry, but also Herbert's almost in a more specific way, because it was all private until he allowed it to be published after his death. So we're grateful for people to allow us to have these windows into their heart and soul. It certainly allows us to know the struggle is not only ours, but others can put it into words, and that gives us strength. So I hope you'll check out some of George Herbert's poetry from the temple. Our next masterpiece will be the Agnus Dei, the Latin for Lamb of God, a painting by Francisco de Zurbarán from the 1635 to 1640. So join me for that. Thank you for being here. God bless and have a great day.